Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Blue Maxima. Welcome back to Blue Boards. This time we're going to be checking out Sentinels of the Multiverse Definitive Edition by... and I don't know the guys' names off the top of my head because they don't have their names anywhere on the box, which is actually weird for a board game to do because you almost always see someone's name on the front of the box or what have you. So we'll just take the manual from just off camera shot and we'll show you the names there. So Christopher Bedell, Adam Rebotaro, and Sare Henderson and Daryl Lauder. There you go. And Christopher Burden was apparently a developer as well. Sentinels of the Multiverse is a game about superheroes fighting supervillains in some wacky environments. It's a lot like Marvel Champions or Marvel Legendary in that way, where you've got a bunch of heroes, a few villains, and some environments to shake things up on the side. All of this is based off something from real-world superhero culture, and they are really just like direct takes on the same concepts. Like, for example, Ra is Thor, Legacy is Superman, the Indestructible Bunker is Iron Man, the Wraith is clearly Batman. There's a few others going on in there, but I imagine that you get the idea, and you'll get the idea just by having a look at some of these. So there is a lot of variety going on though, because every individual hero has their own unique deck of 40 cards that plays towards their own strategy, and therefore they all have a certain amount of complexity to them, although they do all end up being roughly the same amount of power. And let's just go through what a hero's cards look like, shall we? So this is Ra. He's arguably the easiest guy to use in the game, and he's basically built around doing fire damage. So you've got Fire Blast, one shot, which goes off once. Ra deals a target 5 fire damage. You also have some ongoing cards. There we go, like the Living Conflagration, which will deal some damage or some cards, but if he keeps it around for long enough, he'll deal some extra fire damage. The entire idea of his deck is to get to the Staff of Ra, which lets him do more damage just by default, but if he chooses to, he can snap the staff, deal double damage on one attack, and just wipe the floor with whatever he's trying to face down at the time. So the idea of his deck is to get to cards like By Flame Reformed, which let him draw a card, put the Staff of Ra in play from his deck, and then play another card after that. So you'd probably want to go for something like, say, there's another card in here that I can use as an example. It's here somewhere. Solar Flare. You use the card I just talked about, By Flame Reformed, to get the staff. Use Solar Flare as your second play, and if you've already got the staff out, you give it a turn, use Fire Blast, snap it in half, you do something like 14 damage in one turn. And so the game basically revolves around building your tableau around these cards in your deck. You've got one-shots that'll go off once and then hit the discard pile. Ongoings, items, and other sorts of cards along those lines that'll stay out on your tableau, give you new powers and make you stronger. You've got cards that will give you reactions, which is basically you reacting to an enemy throwing an attack at you. You've got cards that will give you new powers, and you've got multiple copies of each card in your deck, making it so that it is kind of hard to brick and not draw the very important card to your strategy, which makes it a very thematic game to play, because since these are all based around their own strategies, it means that you definitely get that feeling of them building up their power and just biding their time until they're strong enough to really start taking on the enemy. And they've all got really unique ideas. Like, you can go with Legacy, for example, if you want something basic, because Legacy's stuff is all about taking damage for his friends, or protecting his friends from damage, or just keeping everyone safe, basically, and then doing a little bit of damage himself. But then you can go kind of out there with someone like Tachyon. And Tachyon is designed around getting through her deck as fast as possible to play this card, Lightspeed Barrage. She deals a target X damage where X is number of the cards in her discard pile. So if you play through a bunch of these cards and then just play that down, you'll smack something in the face really hard, and her deck is based around letting her play more cards every turn, and therefore just making her go faster, stronger, and stronger. And then it gets a little weird, like, for example, Fnatic right here. So Fnatic, her entire thing is to getting to 10 or fewer hit points. And when she does, a lot of her cards get powered up, and it's kind of ridiculous. Fnatic deals 3 targets 2 radiant damage each and regains 2 HP. Then if Fnatic has 10 or fewer HP, play up to 2 cards. And she's even got an item in here that lets her revive herself if she ends up dead. It's in here somewhere, I'll find it. Yeah, there it is. When Fnatic would be reduced to 0 HP, prevent that damage, destroy this card, and she gets 10 HP back. So basically, she's in the same spot that she was in before and able to deal out damage. And honestly, my personal favorite so far is the kind of ridiculously hard to use properly because his entire board can be wiped out in one shot. But honestly, my favorite so far to use is the Argent Adept. And he's kind of ridiculous. So he's got a ton of these ongoing cards, right, that have both perform and accompany effects. And what he needs to do is find his instruments. There's one in here somewhere, trust me. There it is. He needs to find his instruments, which allow him to activate the perform of one card and then perform of another card. Or activate one perform or up to 2 accompany of 2 different cards. Activate the perform of a harmony, then activate the accompany of a harmony. So if you get a bunch of instruments and a bunch of harmony and rhythm and stuff down, you get an absolute ton of effects that you can pull off every single bloody turn. But it's interesting. It gives him a little bit of that personality. It gives him just that bit of flexibility that he needs to be an interesting character. And every single one of these characters is different in the way they go about things. Like Ra and Haka might be relatively similar to each other, but Haka is based around getting a bunch of cards in his hand, discarding them for damage. Captain Cosmic lets you throw constructs out to every other hero that'll help them out or do damage to other people. Tempest controls the weather, which is a bunch of unique ongoing cards that he can do things with, or he can discard them for extra effects. Bunker has a bunch of weapons he can put down that will let him stick cards under it in order to fire them off at different enemies. They've all got their own unique little strategies, and it makes discovering them a lot of fun, even if you end up being severely underpowered due to a few bad card draws, and therefore you just end up kind of being crippled. And in a nice touch, they actually list the complexities of the heroes on their card dividers and in the lore book. So if you've got a new player who wants to learn the game, you can give them one of the easier decks and say, here, this guy's easy to learn, you just manage that and try to have fun along the way. It makes it really easy to teach someone the game. And even then, on top of that, they have their own unique powers as well that they can use. So Ra has the ability to just smack someone for damage. Absolute Zero deals himself some cold or fire damage because his entire thing is getting an item out that lets him turn cold damage into healing and fire damage into cold damage. So it's kind of neat like that. Reveal the top card of your deck, draw or discard it. Great for building up that woofer. Stealth, power until your start phase, -1 damage to the Wraith to let her build up her items that she uses. Haka just hits someone in the face as well. Or put the top card of your deck under one ordnance card in play in order to load them up. What I'm saying is all of these heroes have their own unique strategies in order to win against the villains, and playing them ends up being just fun. Every single one of them is fun in their own way. Of course, you'll end up liking some more than others, but it's just fun. And the way that they've designed these cards as well is interesting, because not only do you have like just your art and your text up the top there, but down the bottom you have a phrase. And these phrases are taken from the Sentinel comics universe that exists inside this universe, because this is all its own set of comics. Like, they all have their own unique comics. All the villains show up at different points throughout, and they just fight each other to the point where there is a thing called I don't remember what it's called. It's called like a rivalry, basically, where if they've got the same icon on their boss card over there and the hero shares that same icon, they deal more damage to each other because of their rivalry. And these little quotes down here give you an idea of their personality. Like Ra here, not even worth my time. The sands of the Sahara are glass in my wake. From the fiery ether, return to me my staff. And it just gives you an idea of what these characters are like in their own unique comics. And they've got this huge, unique universe going on where they've got this podcast with 200 episodes where they talk about individual issues of their comics that have these different like encounters in them. And it feels like its own universe. It feels like they fleshed this out beyond belief. And it does a really good job at selling you on this whole unique comic universe atmosphere. What doesn't sell me so well is the art, I will admit, because Admittedly, this is an upgrade from the previous version of the game, which I'd played a couple of times before I'd managed to get my hands on this version. And I gotta tell you, man, sometimes the art is really good. Like, just as an example here, I'll pull up my favorite example of this. Ra on this character card looks fantastic. Like, he genuinely looks like a big fiery threat. And then when you flip the card over, there he is being bloody crucified, and it's kind of horrifying. And they've done a good job in some parts for improving the art, not you, Tachyon, you're kind of my problem. They've done a good job with improving the art to make them all look like big, threatening superheroes. And then you've got people like Tachyon who look just about as dopey as they did in the original version of Sentinels. And it just kind of bounces off. Like, how do you go from having someone cool looking like Absolute Zero to having that kind of looks like she got up on a bad hair day or something? I don't know, but there is genuinely just a little bit of an imbalance in the art there. And it's a shame because I like a lot of what they've done here, especially the back of these cards, right? Because not only are they unique to help you tell the decks apart, and so as a result, it actually helps you to keep things in mind. It just gives you like this little 3-panel backstory going on here. Like, oh god, I'm in the cold, now I need to be in this tank, but now I've got this suit that actually lets me leave. It just gives you that nice little feeling again, but then you just come across some really derpy art in one out of 5 cards, and it's just like, oh, you're so close and yet so far. But anyway, I've spent too long talking about the heroes. Let's talk about the villains for a bit. So, over here, we have the 6 villain cards. And you'll pick one of these, you'll shuffle their respective deck, you'll follow any setup instructions on that, and then you'll just go and have a fight. And they've all got their own unique effects going on, and they're all just thoroughly unique. Again, it's way better than something like Marvel Champions, where you've got 3 villains, 2 of which feel almost identical to each other. And when you've got like 6 villains here that all feel completely different from each other, it really helps. And I'll tell you about what they are and what their rough strategies are. So for example, Baron Blade. His entire idea at first is to get as many cards as he can into his trash pile, because if he gets too many cards in his trash or his discard pile, he wins. So it's basically a race to take him down. Plus, he has the mobile defense platform as part of the setup, which will protect him from damage while it's alive. So you need to worry about taking that out. And then you've got Citizen Dawn, who leads her own gang of supervillains, and she's basically very protective of them, to the point where if they all end up, like, well, if some of them end up dead, if there's less than the heroes in play, she goes invulnerable for a bit. And it's kind of neat, like, all of the main bosses have this neat thing where they flip over and have some sort of secondary effect on the side, and it actually affects how they go about their business. Like, for example, Grand Overlord Voss. He has a bunch of an army going on, basically. He summons a bunch of them at the start. If there aren't very many of them out, he flips over and basically comes right to you, but at the same time, that gets rid of the defense against damage that he gets. So it's always useful to try and get him down to this, beat him senseless while he's getting more Gene-bound cards out of the deck. And of course, if he manages to come back over to this side and there are 10 or more of his soldiers in play, he's basically won, and his entire deck is about getting as many of those cards out as possible. The Matriarch. I've completely forgotten to play her, so I don't know what she's like. Moving on, sorry. Omnitron. Omnitron is a machine. He deploys devices, and at the end of a turn, he will do the Fabricate on one, and then on the next turn, he'll flip over, and he'll do the Exterminate on all of the devices he's got out. And he can't be defeated until all of his machines are dead, and you bring him down to 0 HP, creating a different combat scenario. And Akash Buta. I think that's how you pronounce that anyway. Who's got the ability to bring out primeval limbs, which is how she actually does attacks and what have you, and you destroy them to hurt her instead of attacking her directly because it's just a bit more effective. And she focuses on the environment deck, so if the environment ends up running out and then getting reshuffled, you will end up having a pretty big problem because she'll heal up. Those are the 6 villains in the game. They are all different from each other. They are all open to their own strategies, and they are all based around the idea of their decks. So let's just take the Citizen Dawn deck, for example. So she's got a bunch of citizens that all work with each other. So you can see here, Citizen Anvil. If Citizen Hammer is in the villain trash, move him into play. Then you've got things like one-shots and ongoings for them as well. Devastating Aurora is kind of painful because it can completely wipe out this tableau of items, ongoings, and power effects that you've been building up. Then you've got Citizen Tears, which helps with Citizen's Blood and Sweat. And then you've got Citizen Dare, who helps with Citizen Truth. And that's just how it works. She's constantly trying to get these citizens out, having their effects bounce off each other and taking you out that way. And they all work differently across the different villains, all of these different decks. And then on top of that, over here, you've got the environments. And the environments are pretty simple to understand because you play one out, you follow the effects on it. But sometimes they have some good effects, like for example, a hero may collect an ongoing card, and sometimes they will have some bad effects. Like for example, there's one entry point. Destroy a room card, +1 damage dealt by villain targets. And of course there are ways to get rid of some of these ongoing effects, of course. But of course, when you draw one of these randomly from the top of this deck, it can completely change up the way the fight is going. And of course, there's 6 of them. The Wagner Mars base, you have to worry about it being self-destructing, or worry about there being an oxygen leak, which might kill you. Megalopolis has like cops and a journalist that can come help you, but at the same time, if the citizens get in trouble, it'll result in you either having to take damage or discard cards. Magmaria has these monsters that come up that if you manage to help them out by getting your hands on some of their friends, they can actually help you out in the fight. Then you've got, what do they call that again? Insula Primalis, which is dinosaurs, and the Ruins of Atlantis, which is basically crumbling around you as you go. And so really, all of this is variety, right? Because the basic game itself is actually really simple. Like, the rulebook is pretty thin, and the basic idea of things is summed up on the back here. Villain turn, they start, they play a card, and then they end their turn. But of course, all of the cards have either start phase or end phase on top of it. So you can see here, end phase, discover 1 primeval limb. And you just have to go around and go through all of these that are on the cards. And because they're all written in that bright red or bright green or bright yellow or bright purple or blue text, it makes things really easy. And then you've got the hero turn, each of which go in play order. They start their turn, they play a single card, they use a single power, they draw a card, that's it. They can draw 2 cards if they don't play a card or use a power. But of course, it all varies by what's going on there. Tachyon will be putting down cards that'll let her play down more cards. Ra will be putting out items on ongoings to increase his damage. The Wraith will be putting out tons of items in order to help out her abilities. Absolute Zero will be using ongoings in order to help change his stuff up. So it's a really simple game, but with all of these different effects and all of these different things going on here, results in something being a little bit of a pain. So as you can see over here, we have the Sentinels of the Multiverse token box. They do try and help you keep track of how much is going on. Whether it be enemies dealing more damage to you, you dealing more damage to the enemies, or less damage depending on the situation, whether or not they cannot deal or take any damage. But the problem is, when you've got like 4 cards from Tachyon or 3 cards from the Wraith that all buff her damage, plus a power going on from another hero, plus the villain getting like 3 different buffs of their own because they've got 4 cards out, some of which give them buffs and choices and what have you. You will have a lot of these tokens out on the field. It can kind of end up looking like a mess, especially when you've also got damage tokens which you need to lay out on top of all the enemies, and the thing can kind of just become an absolute nightmare to manage. And so the game can be really, really, really fiddly. But at the same time, I actually don't find it to be that big of a problem, because you follow the instructions, you use these tokens as just a reference as to what have going on, and you just try and pay attention to cards that go away when they go away. It's that simple, really. It's just that I know this is kind of like a manufacturing nightmare and it'll never happen, but imagine if these little tokens had like strings coming off the side that you could use to like thread it back towards the card that actually caused them to be played in the first place. So when you discard the card, you can follow the strings back to the tokens that need to be removed or something like that. That would be great. But at the end of the day, I have no problem managing it just because they've kept the readability of the game up, thanks to the fact that all the cards have very clearly written text, thanks to the fact that you've got the colors of the start, the play, and the end phase, and the power and the draw phase, so that it all remains fine and readable. And the manual, while not having that much in the way of visual examples, has enough in the way of clear language and written examples to keep things nice and straight without being too much of a problem. It also helps that all the really important terms you need to know are written on the back of the manual, so you don't have to go diving through it every time you play. One other part of Sentinels that I really like is the scaling related to the amount of heroes you have. Something like Marvel Champions usually screws this up by doing something like multiplying the amount of health that the boss has, making it a bit more of a slog to take them on. Sentinels does it a bit differently in that the amount of heroes actually modifies how much something does, whether it be a certain amount of cards that come out, a certain amount of damage that's done, or a certain amount of targets that have damage done to them. And so as a result, it ends up being more interesting because it increases the threat without increasing the overall length of the game, at least for the most part. You'll have more cards coming out, but at the same time you've got more heroes to get rid of those cards, and so it all balances out and makes the game just flow a bit smoother and drags on a lot less when you've got more heroes in play outside of the to be expected. I've got to manage 5 different heroes and take all the time I need to do that sort of thing. And what it also handles better is the presentation of the box itself. And by the presentation, I mean how you go about things. Like, for example, let's just show you the insert going on here. It's a really simple insert, but most of the cards will fit in there without falling over. You might need to stick something in there in order to keep some of the cards from falling over during transit or what have you. But there's enough in there to fit all the cards, even sleeved, as long as you're willing to move the tokens out into the main box and put all the villain cards into the token box. It works fine that way. And it's also got some really lovely little card dividers, which the Marvel Champions nor Marvel Legendary has. Marvel Legendary does have some card dividers, but they're all really generic and you're meant to write your own things on them. It's got all of these really nice little just dividers here, and if we look on the back, you can see that it's actually got a list of all the cards that are actually meant to go in there if you need to count them up. And even complexity levels telling you, well, complexity, difficulty, and peril, just to give you an idea of how hard it's going to be to fight with this hero, this environment, or this villain. And of course, they've even got a secondary lore book, which tells you all of this information in here, so you don't have to look at the dividers. Tells you about the heroes and their backstories and how this universe works. It tells you how they work in gameplay terms. And it even tells you how to reset the deck in order to actually have a proper first game, and even how the villains work. So it's just a really nice little thing, and there's the environments as well. It's just a really nice little thing, and yes, an advertisement for the Kickstarter, which has started as of this video recording. And it doesn't come down to that when it just comes to the rest of the box as well. They give you a bunch of spinners, they are thick cardboard, they feel really nice to use, except for the big villain one, which kind of grinds on the inside of its wheels a bit. And one little thing I appreciate that they do in this box is that in the manual, they just give you a little couple of pages that says, hey, this is exactly what you're meant to do when you first open the box. And it's actually a pretty simple little thing. You just put the spinners together, make sure all the tokens go together in the box, and align the cards and card dividers in the box in whatever way you like, but it's still something I really appreciate, and I can think of some way more advanced games that would do wonders to have that sort of thing in their box. Balcon. If that was everything that was in the box, I'd be willing to give it a thumbs up, right? Because it's got a lot of content, it's got a lot of variability. All of these heroes play differently from each other, all of the villains and environments play differently from each other, and the ways that you mix them up can change up the game significantly. And it's helped out by the fact that the center play is really simple. So the villain takes their turn by doing all their start phase effects, playing out a card, and then doing all their end phase effects. The environment turn works out the same way, and then the heroes just play a card, use a power, draw a card, and that's it. So you've got this simplicity, but because all of these cards add complexity in their own way, it's a flexible game where you can play as nothing but the simplest heroes against the simplest villain and still have a good time beating the crap out of it, while at the same time you can choose to go at it with the hardest villain, the hardest environment, the hardest to understand enemies. And even then, each villain has their own special advanced effect, which you can do as like an optional thing, and the optional thing will make them that much harder. Like, for example, we know Baron Blade is discard cards in order to win, but in this mode, he discards even more cards at the end of his turn to just make that turn limit a little bit shorter, and therefore make things a bit more difficult. So it gives you plenty to play with right here. But then they went that little bit further and included a little bit more content in the box, and it works really well. So you saw the power cards over there that determine their starting health, what power they have available to them, and also what happens when they get knocked out. And this is a really nice touch as well, where other heroes can do specific things, or you can do other little things here in order to just buy yourself a little bit more time there and not completely remove like a player or a hero from the game in order to keep things interesting. But then you've got the variant powers, and these give you a bunch of other cool little effects as well, and they're themed really well as well, because these are all meant to be like the first appearance comics, and they're styled to be like some sort of comic collector sleeve, where they had like the 9.9 down there if it's a perfectly kept copy. It's all a gigantic scam, of course, but the fact that they've just put the effort in to make this all look as neat as it does and just give you a little idea of the timeline of this unique little universe. And they even have like other comic covers on the back, like the first time they all die or get defeated. And it's all just, again, a really nice touch. And these powers absolutely do change up the game to the point where they actually change the maximum HP of the hero in question, because the power is just that much more powerful. Like, hang on, where is Ra? There he is. So you can see down there, Ra has a starting health of 30, but here they give him a starting health of 29. Not that much difference, I grant you, but it does exist. But where it gets really, really cool is the campaign. I haven't even touched this yet because I've just been busy going through all of the villains, all of the heroes, and all of the environments. But the campaign is kind of something special. So the way this works is you're meant to arrange this by chronological order, and it's done by both events and critical events. And you can see down here, 0 collection limit. The idea is that these little things here, while giving you an idea of a conflict that's happened in the Sentinels universe, also gives you a special variant challenge for a regular old boss. And if you manage to beat that variant, you can flip the card over, see how it ended, which again, nice job on the theming there, but you also get one of 2 special powers, which you can take into other challenge fights that let you do that. For example, critical event, March 1975, 1 collection limit. And these powers can be really quite something, like put 1 card from each trash under the top card of the associated deck, or destroy any number of hero, ongoing, and or item cards, then 1 villain damage deals itself a bunch of damage. But then you get critical events, and these are great. So you've got another like Mad Bomber event going on here. And then you flip it over, and it's an entirely new variant of the boss, with its own special effects, its own setup, and even its own advanced thing. So you don't like have the ability to like flip this over, right? In order to like get that secondary effect. But the effects on here are so cool that you really wouldn't want to do that anyway. And it's not just these 2 cards here. So you've got, here's another one with Cosmic Omnitron. Or you've got another one here with Akash Mecha. And you've got another one here with Sensor, which uses the Grand Warlord Vostek, but has an entirely different little villain going on. And here's the other 2. So you've got Citizen Dawn, but she's been inflicted with the solar eclipse, and you've got the Mock Triarch, which appears to be a clone of the Matriarch. Whatever the bloody hell her name was, I do apologize. And the idea is you're meant to play this through as a campaign, and you've got all of these different little events you can do. So it's just cool. It's just nice that you get all of this extra content here, even if you don't play around with it. As in, you just like take Cosmic Omnitron Advanced Mode and just try and beat the bejesus out of him. It's just really nice to have this level of extra content included with the base game. And so yeah, as a result, I love Sentinels of the Multiverse Definitive Edition. I think it's really good. It's simple, but All of these heroes have their own way of going about things, and that increases the complexity of the game. The 6 villains are the same way. They've all got their own neat little ways they go about fighting, and it makes the experience different every time. And then you mix in the environments over there, and it changes things up a little bit more. The art can be a little bit rough around the edges, and it's a bit number crunchy, and it's kind of hard to manage all of the different effects going on, so it's a bit fiddly. But it's just a really well presented, really generous too, like 12 heroes, 6 villains, and 6 environment decks will keep you going for a while, not even including like the variant powers and the bonus campaign content. Better than I ever got with Marvel Champions or Marvel Legendary by a significant margin, and so as a result, I wholeheartedly recommend the game. It's just really good at what it does, to the point where even Marvel products will shrink and shrivel away in its majesty. Anyway, this has been Blue Maxima. I'll see you all next time.